The blood on her hands was still wet when she heard the first howl slice through the twilight, and Eleanor Jane knew she had maybe an hour before the coyotes came for what remained of her flock. She wiped her palms on her already stained work dress, the fabric rough against her calloused skin, and looked out over the rolling grassland that stretched endlessly from her small homestead outside Council Bluffs, Iowa. It was 1878, and she had been alone for 3 weeks now, ever since her father had taken a bad fall from his horse and broken his neck on the rocks by the creek. The sheep were all she had left, 23 woolly bodies that represented the difference between survival and starvation through the coming winter. Eleanor was 22 years old, and she had never been particularly beautiful by the standards of the town ladies who occasionally passed through on their way to somewhere more civilized. Her hands were too rough, her skin too sun-darkened, her frame too lean from hard work and sparse meals. But her eyes were a striking green, the color of new grass after rain, and her hair, when she bothered to wash it, fell in thick auburn waves down her back. Tonight, it was tied back in a practical braid, bits of straw still clinging to the strands. She had been sleeping in shifts for 2 weeks, ever since the coyotes had discovered her sheep were vulnerable. 3 hours of fitful rest, then up to check the flock, then another few hours if she was lucky. The exhaustion was beginning to blur the edges of everything, making her clumsy and slow. Yesterday she had nearly put the axe through her foot instead of the wood she had been splitting. The dark circles under her eyes had taken on a permanent quality, and her hands shook when she tried to thread a needle or pour coffee. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in shades of crimson and gold that would have been beautiful if Eleanor had the energy to appreciate them. She grabbed her father's old rifle from where it leaned against the doorframe of their small sod house and checked that it was loaded. 6 shots. She was a decent shot, good enough to have killed 2 coyotes already, but they were pack animals, clever and patient. They would wait for her to fall asleep, and then they would come. She walked out to where the sheep were clustered nervously in their makeshift pen, a rickety fence her father had built 3 summers ago. It would not hold against determined predators, but it kept the sheep from wandering. They bleated softly as she approached, recognizing her scent, and she felt a sudden surge of affection for the stupid, helpless creatures. They depended on her completely, and she was failing them. The first stars were beginning to appear when she heard the horse. Eleanor spun around, rifle raised, her heart hammering against her ribs. Riders after dark were rarely good news, especially for a woman alone. She squinted into the gathering darkness and made out a single figure on horseback, moving slowly up the trail toward her property. "That is far enough," she called out, her voice steadier than she felt. "State your business." The rider stopped about 30 feet away and raised his hands to show they were empty. "Easy now, miss. I am not here to cause trouble. Name is Marcus John Cartwright. I am looking for work, and I heard in town there might be a homestead out this way that could use a hand." Eleanor kept the rifle trained on him. "Who told you that?" "Woman at the general store. Said there was a girl out here trying to run a sheep operation by herself since her father passed. Said you might be in need of help." His voice was deep and calm, with a slight drawl that suggested he was from further south. "Texas, maybe, or Kansas." "I cannot pay much," Eleanor said, though her arms were already aching from holding the rifle up. "And I do not have room to house anyone." "I am not asking for much. Food and a place to sleep, and maybe a small wage when you can manage it. I have my own bedroll and I can sleep rough. I have done it plenty of times before." He shifted in his saddle, and she caught a glimpse of his face in the fading light. Young, maybe 25 or 26, with dark hair that needed cutting and a jaw dark with several days of stubble. Why would you want to work for almost nothing? Eleanor asked suspiciously. What are you running from? Nothing illegal, if that is what you are thinking. I just need a place to lay low for a while, and I prefer to earn my keep. He paused. I heard the Coyotes when I was riding up. They have been giving you trouble. They killed 3 of my sheep last week, Eleanor admitted. I've been trying to keep watch at night, but I cannot stay awake forever. I can help with that. I am a light sleeper, and I am a fair shot. You let me take the night watch, and you can get some proper rest. In the morning, I will do whatever other work you need done. He lowered his hand slowly. I give you my word I mean you no harm, Miss Jane. I am just a cowboy looking for honest work. Eleanor studied him for a long moment, weighing her options. She was exhausted, and she knew she could not keep going like this much longer. If he tried anything, she had the rifle, and she would not hesitate to use it. Finally, she lowered the gun slightly. All right. You can stay, but you sleep outside and you keep your distance. Any trouble and you are gone. Understood? Yes, madam, I understand perfectly. Marcus dismounted with an easy grace that spoke of years in the saddle. He was tall, she noticed, probably over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and the lean, muscular build of someone who worked hard for a living. He wore typical cowboy attire, worn denim pants, a faded blue shirt, scuffed boots, and a hat that had seen better days. He led his horse, a sturdy-looking bay gelding, closer to the house and began unsaddling him. Eleanor watched warily, the rifle still in her hands. There is a lean-to behind the house where you can put your horse. It is not much, but it will keep him out of the weather. Thank you, miss. That is generous of you, Eleanor snorted. It is practical. A man with a dead horse is a man who cannot leave if I decide I want him gone. Marcus glanced at her with what might have been amusement. Fair enough. She showed him where to settle his horse, then pointed to a spot near the sheep pen. You can set up your bedroll there. Gives you a good view of the pen, and you will hear if anything tries to get at them. Good thinking. He dropped his saddle and bedroll on the ground. When did you last eat, Miss Jane? The question caught her off guard. I had some bread this morning, I think. You think? He shook his head. You need to eat. Cannot keep watch on an empty stomach, even during the day. I have been managing, she said defensively. I am sure you have. But if you have got any food in that house, you should eat something. I will keep an eye on things out here. Eleanor wanted to argue, but her stomach chose that moment to growl loudly. She felt her face heat with embarrassment. Fine. There is some stew left from yesterday. I will bring you a bowl. I would appreciate that. She went inside, still feeling off balance from this sudden change in her circumstances. The sod house was small, just one room with a fireplace, a narrow bed, a table and 2 chairs, and shelves for their few possessions. It was dim inside, lit only by the embers in the fireplace, and she lit a lamp before ladling cold stew into 2 bowls. Her hands were shaking again, she noticed with frustration. When she brought the food outside, Marcus had already set up his bedroll and was checking his own rifle, a Winchester that looked well maintained. He looked up as she approached and accepted the bowl with a nod of thanks. This is good stew, he said after the first bite. You make it yourself, my mother's recipe. She died when I was 12, but I remember most of what she taught me. Eleanor sat down on the ground a safe distance away and ate her own portion. The stew was barely warm, but it tasted better than anything she had eaten in days, probably because she was too tired to taste much of anything lately. They ate in silence for a while, and Eleanor found herself stealing glances at him. In the lamplight, she could see his face more clearly. He had a strong profile with a straight nose and well-defined cheekbones. His eyes were dark, probably brown, though it was hard to tell in the poor light. There was a scar on his left cheek, thin and white, old enough to be well healed. She wondered what had caused it but did not ask. "So what brought you to Council Bluffs?" she asked instead. "We are not exactly on the way to anywhere important." Marcus smiled slightly. "That is part of the appeal. I have been drifting for a few years now, picking up work where I can find it. Been as far west as California, down through Texas, up into Montana. Figured Iowa was as good a place as any to spend some time." "You have no family, no place you call home," his expression shuddered. "Not anymore. My folks had a ranch in Kansas, died of cholera when I was 19. I sold the place and have been moving ever since." "I am sorry," Eleanor said quietly. "I know what it is like to lose family. The woman in town mentioned your father passed recently. My condolences." "Thank you." She set down her empty bowl. "It was sudden. He was always so careful with the horses, but I guess anyone can have an accident. It is a hard life out here, even when things go right." Marcus finished his stew and stood up. "You should get some sleep, Miss Jane. I will keep watch." Eleanor wanted to protest, to insist that she could handle another night, but the exhaustion was crushing her. She had not slept for more than a few hours at a time in so long that she had almost forgotten what real rest felt like. "Wake me if there is any trouble," she said, getting to her feet. "I will, you have my word." She hesitated, then handed him the rifle. "You might need this. I have a pistol inside." He took it carefully. "Thank you for trusting me with it." "I am trusting you with my livelihood," she said. "The rifle is nothing compared to that." Inside the house, Eleanor barred the door and checked the small pistol her father had given her on her 18th birthday. It was loaded and ready. She set it on the small table next to her bed, close enough to grab if needed, then lay down fully clothed on top of the blankets. She told herself she would just close her eyes for a moment, that she needed to stay alert in case this stranger proved untrustworthy. She was asleep in seconds. Eleanor woke to sunlight streaming through the small window and the smell of coffee. For a moment, she could not remember where she was or what day it was. Then it all came rushing back, and she sat up so quickly that her head spun. How long had she slept? What had happened to the sheep? She grabbed the pistol and rushed to the door, yanking it open. Outside, Marcus was crouched by a small fire, a battered coffee pot sitting in the coals. He looked up as she emerged, squinting against the morning sun. "Easy there. Everything is fine. The sheep are all accounted for." Eleanor lowered the pistol, her heart still racing. "Did the coyotes come?" "Twice. I fired a few warning shots and they scattered. They will probably try again tonight, but we are ready for them." He poured coffee into a tin cup and held it out to her. "You look like you could use this." She took the cup, still trying to process what had happened. She had slept through the entire night, an entire night of uninterrupted sleep, something she had not experienced since before her father died. The coffee was strong and hot, and she drank it gratefully. "Thank you," she said, "for watching over them, for letting me sleep." That was the deal. He poured himself a cup and took a sip, looking out at the sheep grazing peacefully in the morning light. "You have a good flock here. They are healthy, well cared for. You have done a good job with them on your own." The compliment made something warm unfold in her chest. "My father taught me everything he knew. We started with just 5 sheep 4 years ago, built it up from there." "That is impressive." Marcus stood and stretched, and Eleanor noticed that he looked tired. His eyes were reddened, and there were new lines of fatigue around his mouth. He had stayed up all night for her, a stranger. "You should sleep now," she said. "I can watch things during the day. I will rest for a few hours, but then I want to reinforce that pen. The fence is too weak. A determined coyote could get through it easily." He nodded toward a section where the posts were leaning at an angle. "If you have any extra lumber, I can shore it up. There is some behind the house. My father was planning to fix it before." She trailed off. "I will take care of it," Marcus said gently. Get some breakfast in you first, though. You are still too thin." Eleanor bristled. "I am perfectly capable of feeding myself." "I am sure you are. I am just saying that you look like you have been working yourself half to death, and you need to take better care of yourself." He gave her a level look. "Cannot take care of the sheep if you collapse from exhaustion or starvation." She wanted to argue, but he was right, and they both knew it. "Fine. I will make breakfast for both of us. Eggs and bacon, if that suits you." "Sounds perfect." Eleanor went back inside and started cooking, her movements automatic from years of practice. She had 6 chickens that provided eggs regularly, and she had traded some wool for bacon in town last month. As she worked, she found herself thinking about Marcus. He seemed genuine, but she had learned the hard way that appearances could be deceiving. Her father had always warned her to be careful around men she did not know, especially out here where law enforcement was scarce and help was far away. But he had kept his word. He had watched over her sheep all night, and he had not tried to enter her house or bother her in any way. That had to count for something. She cooked enough for both of them and brought it outside. They ate together near the fire, and Eleanor asked him more about his travels. Marcus proved to be a good storyteller, describing the wild beauty of the Montana mountains, the chaos of San Francisco, the brutal heat of the Texas desert. He made her laugh with a story about an ornery mule he had worked with on a ranch near El Paso, and she realized with some surprise that she had not laughed in weeks. After breakfast, Marcus spread out his bedroll in the shade of the house and was asleep within minutes. Eleanor watched him for a moment, noting the way his face relaxed in sleep, making him look younger. Then she shook herself and got to work. There was always work to be done on a homestead. She checked the sheep for any signs of illness or injury, finding 2 with small cuts that needed tending. She cleaned out the chicken coop, gathered eggs, and hauled water from the creek for the vegetable garden she had been trying to maintain. The garden was not doing well. She had not had time to give it proper attention, and the weeds were taking over. She was pulling weeds in the hot midday sun when Marcus emerged from the house, looking more rested. He had washed his face and hands, and his hair was damp. "Feeling better?" she asked, sitting back on her heels. "Much, thank you." He surveyed the garden with a critical eye. "This could use some work. I know. I have not had time for it lately. I will help. 2 people can get it done faster than 1. He crouched down beside her and started pulling weeds with efficient, practiced movements. "My mother had a big garden back in Kansas. She grew everything: tomatoes, beans, corn, squash, herbs for cooking and medicine. I spent many hours working in that garden." They worked side by side in companionable silence, and Eleanor found it surprisingly pleasant. She was not used to having help, to sharing the burden of all the endless tasks. After an hour, they had cleared a significant section of weeds, and the vegetable plants looked healthier already. "You have good soil here," Marcus observed. "With proper care, this garden could produce a lot of food." "That was my mother's garden originally. She always said Iowa soil was good for growing things if you were willing to put in the work." Eleanor wiped sweat from her forehead. "I have been trying to keep it going, but it has been hard. It will be easier now that you have help." He said it matter-of-factly, as if his presence here was already an established fact, and maybe it was. Eleanor realized that she did not want him to leave. Having someone else here, someone to share the work and the worry, made everything feel more manageable, less lonely. Over the next week, they fell into a routine. Eleanor handled the daytime work, caring for the animals and maintaining the homestead, while Marcus slept. In the late afternoon, he would wake and help her with whatever needed doing. Then, as night fell, he would take up his position near the sheep pen with his rifle, and Eleanor would sleep peacefully inside the house. The coyotes came every night, drawn by the scent of the flock. Marcus never killed any of them. He said that if you killed them, the pack would just become more aggressive. Instead, he fired warning shots and made noise, teaching them that this particular flock was too much trouble to be worth the effort. Gradually, the visits became less frequent. Eleanor found herself looking forward to the evenings, when they would share a meal and talk before Marcus began his watch. He was easy to talk to, patient and thoughtful in his responses. He told her about his life on the road, the good jobs and the bad ones, the people he had met and the places he had seen. In turn, she found herself opening up about her own life, her childhood with her parents, her dreams for the future. "I want to expand the flock," she told him one evening as they sat by the fire. "Double it, maybe triple it eventually. Build a real barn instead of that lean-to. Maybe even hire some help when I can afford it." "Those are good goals," Marcus said. "Ambitious, but achievable if you work smart." "My father always said I was too ambitious for a woman. He thought I should marry someone from town and let them take over the homestead." She poked at the fire with a stick. "But I do not want to marry just anyone. I want a partner, someone who sees me as an equal. That is not too much to ask." Marcus was watching her with an expression she could not quite read. "Any man would be lucky to have a woman like you. Smart, hardworking, determined." Eleanor felt heat rise in her face that had nothing to do with the fire. "You barely know me." "I know enough. I have seen how you care for your animals, how you push yourself to keep this place running even when you are exhausted. I have seen your kindness and your strength." He paused. "I have known plenty of people in my travels, Miss Jane, and most of them would not have given a drifting stranger the chance you gave me. You needed work, and I needed help. It was practical. Maybe, but you still took a risk on me, and I am grateful for it." They looked at each other across the fire, and Eleanor felt something shift between them, something warm and electric that made her pulse quicken. She looked away first, unsettled by the intensity of her own reaction. "I should get to sleep," she said, standing up quickly. "Good night, Marcus." "Good night, Eleanor." It was the first time he had used her given name, and the sound of it in his deep voice made her shiver. Inside the house, she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. She was developing feelings for him, she realized with a mixture of excitement and alarm. Real feelings, beyond simple gratitude for his help. She thought about the way he smiled when he was amused, the way his hands moved with such competence and care when he worked, the sound of his voice when he told stories. She thought about how safe she felt with him nearby, how right it seemed to have him here. But what did he feel? Was he just being kind, or was there something more behind those dark eyes when he looked at her? The next few days were torture. Eleanor found herself hyper-aware of Marcus, noticing every glance, every casual touch when they worked side by side, every smile. She caught him watching her sometimes, his expression thoughtful, and wondered what he was thinking. 2 weeks after Marcus had arrived, a hard rainstorm rolled in from the west. Eleanor woke to thunder and the sound of rain hammering on the roof. She got up and looked outside, worried about the sheep. The pen was already turning into a muddy mess, and Marcus was out there in the downpour, checking on the animals. She grabbed her coat and ran out to help. The rain was cold and heavy, soaking her to the skin in seconds. "Get back inside," Marcus shouted over the noise of the storm. "No point in both of us getting drenched. The sheep need to be moved to higher ground, or they will be standing in a lake," Eleanor shouted back. "Help me get them over to the south pasture." Working together, they herded the sheep to a slightly elevated area where the water was draining better. The animals were frightened by the thunder and difficult to manage, but eventually they got them settled. By the time they finished, Both Eleanor and Marcus were soaked through and shivering. They ran back to the house, and Eleanor pushed open the door. "Get inside. I will make coffee and get the fire built up." "Eleanor, I should not. You are freezing, and so am I. Get inside before you catch pneumonia." Marcus hesitated, then nodded and followed her in. Eleanor immediately went to work building up the fire while Marcus stood awkwardly near the door, dripping on the floor. "Take off your coat at least," she said. "I will see if I can find some dry clothes. My father's things should fit you." She rummaged through the trunk where she had stored her father's clothes, pulling out a shirt and pants. They would be a bit short on Marcus, but they were dry. She handed them to him, then retreated to the corner to change out of her own wet dress, turning her back to give them both some privacy. When she turned around again, Marcus had changed and was draping his wet clothes over one of the chairs near the fire. The borrowed clothes were indeed too short, the pants ending above his ankles and the shirt tight across his shoulders, but at least they were dry. Eleanor made coffee and poured 2 cups, her hands still trembling from the cold. They sat near the fire, warming themselves, and listened to the rain continue to pound the roof. "That was a hard storm," Marcus said. "Good thing we moved the sheep when we did. They would have been miserable otherwise." Eleanor wrapped her hands around the warm cup. "Thank you for helping, of course." He was watching her with that intent look again, and she felt her breath catch. "Eleanor, I need to tell you something." Her heart started racing. "What is it?" "I've been here for 2 weeks now, and I know I said I was just passing through, but—" He set down his cup and ran a hand through his damp hair. "I do not want to leave. I want to stay here if you will have me." "Stay," Eleanor repeated, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. "I know it is asking a lot. I do not have much to offer you except my labor and my protection. But I have never felt so at home anywhere as I do here, working beside you." He met her eyes. "I care about you, Eleanor, more than I should probably, given that I have only known you for 2 weeks. But I cannot deny it anymore." Eleanor set down her own cup with shaking hands. "I care about you too. I have been trying not to because I thought you would leave eventually, but I cannot help it." Marcus stood and crossed the small space between them, kneeling in front of her chair. "Then let me stay. Let me help you build this place into everything you dreamed it could be. Let me be your partner in work and in life." "Are you asking me to marry you?" Eleanor whispered. "Eventually, yes, if you will have me. But I know that is a big step, and we have not known each other long. For now, I am just asking for a chance to prove myself to you, to show you that I am serious about this, about us." Eleanor reached out and touched his face, feeling the rough stubble under her fingers. "You have already proven yourself. You have kept your word every day since you arrived. You have worked hard and asked for nothing in return. You have made me feel less alone. You have done the same for me." He turned his head to press a kiss to her palm, and Eleanor felt warmth flood through her that had nothing to do with the fire. "Then stay," she said. "Be my partner. Help me build something good here." Marcus smiled, a real smile that transformed his whole face, and stood, pulling her up with him. He cupped her face in his hands and kissed her, gentle and sweet at first, then deeper as she responded. Eleanor had been kissed before, clumsy attempts by boys in town who thought they could win over the sheep farmer's daughter, but this was different. This felt like coming home. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Marcus rested his forehead against hers. "I am going to make you happy, Eleanor Jane. I swear it." "You already do," she whispered. They spent the rest of the day inside, talking and planning and learning each other. Marcus told her about his dreams of having a place of his own again, something he could build and improve and be proud of. Eleanor shared her fears about managing the homestead alone, about the responsibility of it all. They talked about practical things too, how to expand the flock, what crops to plant in the spring, whether to get cattle or pigs to diversify. As evening fell and the rain continued, Marcus said reluctantly, "I should go check on the sheep. I will come with you." They went out together into the wet darkness, checking that the flock was safe and settled for the night. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, and the air smelled clean and fresh. When they returned to the house, Eleanor did not want to say goodnight and watch him leave for his bedroll outside. "Stay inside tonight," she said softly, "just to sleep. It is too wet and cold out there." Marcus looked at her seriously. "Are you sure? I do not want to compromise your reputation." "There is no one around for miles to know or care, and I trust you." She paused. "Besides, we are going to be married eventually, are we not?" "Yes, as soon as you are ready." He reached out and took her hand. "I will sleep on the floor. Keep everything proper." Eleanor nodded, though part of her wished he would share her narrow bed. But there would be time for that later after they were married. For now, it was enough to have him close. That night, Eleanor fell asleep to the sound of the rain on the roof and Marcus's steady breathing from his place on the floor, and she felt happier than she had in a very long time. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the storm having passed through during the night. Marcus woke early and slipped outside to check on the animals before Eleanor stirred. When she emerged from the house, he was already working on reinforcing the sheep pen, replacing posts that had been weakened by the rain. "You do not have to do everything alone anymore, you know," she said, coming to stand beside him. "Wake me next time and I will help." He grinned at her. "I like letting you sleep. You look peaceful when you are resting." "Have you been watching me sleep?" she asked, trying to sound stern but unable to hide her smile. "Maybe a little. You are beautiful when you sleep. Beautiful when you are awake too, for that matter." Eleanor felt herself blush. She was not used to compliments, especially not sincere ones. Flatterer, just telling the truth. He drove another post into the ground with efficient strikes of the hammer. "I was thinking we should go into Council Bluffs tomorrow. We need supplies, and I should probably make my presence here official. Do not want people thinking I am some vagrant taking advantage of you." "I suppose you are right. I have been putting off going to town because I hate leaving the sheep, but they should be safe enough during the day now that the coyotes have mostly given up." The next day, they hitched up the wagon and made the 3-hour journey into Council Bluffs. It was a modest town, built on the bluffs overlooking the Missouri River, with a main street lined with businesses and a residential area spreading out beyond. Eleanor did not come to town often, preferring to stay with her animals, but she knew the shopkeepers and some of the other residents. Word of her father's death had spread, and several people offered their condolences as she and Marcus walked down the main street. She could feel the curious looks directed at Marcus, the stranger by her side, and knew that rumors would be flying by nightfall. They stopped at the general store first, where Mrs. Henderson greeted them from behind the counter. She was a round, cheerful woman in her 50s who knew everyone's business. "Eleanor, dear, good to see you. And this must be the young man I sent out to your place. Marcus, was it?" "Yes, madam." "Marcus Cartwright. Thank you for the recommendation." "Well, you looked like a decent sort, and I knew Eleanor needed help." Mrs. Henderson's sharp eyes took in everything. The way Marcus stood protectively close to Eleanor, the easy familiarity between them. "I hope the arrangement is working out." "Very well, thank you," Eleanor said firmly. "Marcus has been invaluable. The coyotes have stopped bothering the sheep, and we have been able to make several improvements to the homestead." "I am glad to hear it, Mrs." Henderson began gathering the supplies Eleanor requested: flour, sugar, coffee, ammunition for the rifles. "Will you be staying on permanently, Mr. Cartwright?" "That is my intention, yes, madam. Miss Jane and I are planning to marry once we have made proper arrangements." Eleanor nearly dropped the jar of preserves she had been examining. They had talked about marriage, certainly, but she had not expected Marcus to announce it so publicly. Mrs. Henderson's face lit up with delight. "How wonderful! Congratulations to you both. When is the wedding?" "We have not set a date yet," Eleanor managed to say. "Soon, though." After they left the general store laden with packages, Eleanor pulled Marcus aside into a quiet alley. "You just told the biggest gossip in Council Bluffs that we are getting married. By tonight the whole town will know." "Good," Marcus said calmly. "That way everyone knows you are spoken for, and I do not have to worry about other men trying to court you." He gave her a teasing smile. "Unless you would rather keep our engagement private." "No, I just wish you had warned me. I nearly had a heart attack." But she was smiling despite herself. "I suppose we should actually set a date then if we are telling people. How about next month? That gives us time to prepare, and it is still early enough in the fall that the weather should be decent." He took her hand. "Unless you want to wait longer." "No, next month is perfect." Eleanor squeezed his hand. "I do not want to wait any longer than necessary." They spent the rest of the afternoon in town, and Marcus insisted on visiting the land office to formally register himself as a resident and Eleanor's intended husband. The clerk, a thin man with spectacles, seemed surprised that Eleanor was marrying at all, but he processed the paperwork efficiently. "You will need a witness for the marriage ceremony," he informed them, "and you will have to have it officiated by a judge or minister." "We will take care of it," Marcus assured him. On the way home, Eleanor felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Everything was happening so fast, but it also felt completely right. She glanced at Marcus, who was driving the wagon with easy competence, and felt a surge of affection so strong it almost hurt. "Are you sure about this?" she asked quietly. "Marrying me, tying yourself to this homestead. You could go anywhere, do anything. You do not have to stay here." Marcus pulled the wagon to a stop and turned to face her. "Eleanor, I have been everywhere. I have seen mountains and oceans and cities and deserts. None of it made me happy. None of it felt like home." He took both her hands in his. "You make me happy. This place makes me happy, I am sure." Eleanor leaned over and kissed him, not caring that they were in the middle of the road where anyone could see. When they broke apart, Marcus was smiling. "Let us go home," he said softly. "Home." Eleanor loved the sound of that. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of preparation. They continued working on the homestead during the day, but in the evenings, they planned for the wedding. Eleanor had her mother's wedding dress, carefully preserved in the trunk, and she spent hours altering it to fit her taller, leaner frame. Marcus cleaned and repaired the house, wanting it to be perfect for when Eleanor became his wife in truth as well as name. They decided to keep the ceremony small and simple. Mrs. Henderson agreed to be a witness, along with her husband, and they found a traveling minister who was passing through Council Bluffs and was willing to perform the ceremony at the homestead. The day before the wedding, Eleanor was a bundle of nerves. She cleaned the house 3 times, then checked on the sheep obsessively, then started cleaning again. Marcus finally took her hands and pulled her outside. "Walk with me," he said. "You need to clear your head." They walked out past the sheep pen, over the gentle rolling hills that stretched toward the horizon. The sun was setting, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. Marcus put his arm around her shoulders and Eleanor leaned into his warmth. "Are you nervous?" he asked. "Terrified," she admitted. "Not about marrying you, about everything else. What if I am a terrible wife? What if this does not work out? Eleanor, look at me." When she did, his dark eyes were steady and sure. "We are already partners. We already work together, live together, trust each other. The wedding is just making it official. Nothing fundamental is going to change. I suppose you are right. I know I am right. And even if things are not perfect, we will figure it out together. That is what partners do." He kissed her forehead. "I love you, Eleanor Jane. I should have said it sooner, but I am saying it now. I love you, and I am going to spend the rest of my life proving it to you." Tears welled up in Eleanor's eyes. "I love you too, Marcus, so much it scares me sometimes. I know the feeling." He held her close as the sun dipped below the horizon. "But we do not have to be scared. We have each other." The wedding day dawned bright and clear, unseasonably warm for late October. Eleanor woke early, her stomach full of butterflies, and spent an hour getting ready. The dress fit beautifully after her alterations, the cream-colored fabric simple but elegant. She left her hair down, the way Marcus liked it, with just a few small flowers tucked into the waves. Mrs. Henderson arrived mid-morning with her husband and the minister, a kindly older man with white hair and a gentle smile. They set up in front of the house, where Marcus had built a simple arch decorated with late-blooming wildflowers. When Eleanor stepped outside and saw Marcus waiting for her, her breath caught. He had cleaned up, shaved, and was wearing a new shirt and pants that actually fit him properly. But it was the look on his face that made her heart race, awed and tender and full of love. The ceremony was short and sweet. They exchanged vows, promising to love and support each other through whatever life brought them. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Marcus kissed her with such feeling that Mrs. Henderson actually whooped with joy. Afterward, they shared a simple meal that Mrs. Henderson had helped prepare: roasted chicken, fresh bread, vegetables from the garden, and a small cake that Eleanor had made the day before. They ate and talked and laughed, and Eleanor felt surrounded by warmth and happiness. As the sun began to set and their guests prepared to leave, Mrs. Henderson hugged Eleanor tightly. "You made a good choice, dear. He is a fine man and he clearly adores you. Thank you for everything, Mrs. Henderson, for sending him to me in the first place. It was my pleasure." "You deserve to be happy, Eleanor. Both of you do." After everyone left, Eleanor and Marcus stood together watching the wagon disappear down the road. Then Marcus turned to her with a smile that made her knees weak. "Alone at last, Mrs. Cartwright." "Mrs. Cartwright," Eleanor repeated, testing out the name. "I like the sound of that. So do I." He swept her up into his arms, making her laugh, and carried her into the house. "Welcome home, wife." That night, Eleanor discovered a whole new dimension to their partnership, one built on trust and desire, and the deep connection they had forged over the past month. Marcus was gentle and patient, making sure she felt safe and cherished, and Eleanor gave herself to him completely, holding nothing back. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, and Eleanor rested her head on Marcus's chest, listening to his heartbeat. "I never imagined I could be this happy," she whispered. "A month ago I was alone and exhausted and terrified I would lose everything. Now I have you, and the future looks so bright." "I never imagined I would find a home again," Marcus replied, stroking her hair. "I thought I was destined to just drift forever, never belonging anywhere. But you gave me a reason to stay, a reason to build something lasting." "We will build it together," Eleanor said firmly. "Everything from now on we do together." "Together," Marcus agreed, and sealed the promise with a kiss. The first year of their marriage was not without challenges. Winter came hard and early, bringing snow and bitter cold that tested them both. They lost 2 sheep to illness despite their best efforts, and the vegetable garden was buried under snow for months. But they faced everything side by side, supporting each other through the difficulties. Marcus proved to be as hardworking and resourceful as Eleanor had hoped. He spent the winter months building a proper barn for the sheep, working even in the bitter cold to give their flock better shelter. Eleanor helped whenever she could, holding boards in place while he hammered, fetching tools, bringing him hot coffee when his hands got too cold. They also spent the long winter evenings planning for the future. Marcus had ideas for expanding their operation, and Eleanor contributed her own knowledge of sheep farming. Together, they created a comprehensive plan. They would increase the flock to 50 sheep within 2 years, build a larger barn and proper fencing, and eventually add cattle to diversify their income. "We could also consider getting some chickens for sale, not just for eggs," Marcus suggested one night as they sat by the fire. "And maybe some pigs. Farmers always need breeding stock." "That is a good idea. We could become known as a reliable source for quality animals." Eleanor was knitting a sweater, her needles clicking rhythmically. "I have been thinking we should also improve our wool production. If we can breed for better quality wool, we can command higher prices." "Smart thinking. We make a good team, Eleanor. We do we not?" She smiled at him over her knitting. "I was so worried about managing this place alone, and now look at us. We are planning to triple our operation. That is what happens when 2 people work toward the same goal. We are stronger together than either of us could be apart." As winter gave way to spring, their plans began to take shape. The snow melted, revealing the solid barn Marcus had built. They used some of their savings to purchase 10 more sheep from a farmer in the next county, carefully selecting healthy ewes that would strengthen their breeding program. Marcus also bought 2 young pigs and built them a sturdy pen. Eleanor discovered she was pregnant in late April. She had suspected for a few weeks, but she wanted to be certain before telling Marcus. When she finally confirmed it, she found him working in the new barn and simply said, "We are going to need to build another room onto the house." Marcus looked up from the hay he was spreading. "Why is that?" "Because we will be needing space for a baby come November." He dropped the pitchfork and crossed to her in 3 long strides, pulling her into his arms. "Are you serious? We are going to have a baby?" "Yes," Eleanor laughed at his excitement. "I am serious. You are going to be a father." Marcus spun her around, then immediately set her down gently, looking worried. "I am sorry. I should not have done that. Are you feeling all right? Do you need to sit down? Should you be out here in the barn?" "Marcus, I am pregnant, not made of glass. I feel fine and I can still work." "But you should take it easy. Let me handle the heavy work. We will figure it out as we go." Eleanor cupped his face in her hands. "Are you happy?" "Happy does not even begin to cover it." He kissed her deeply. "I love you so much, Eleanor, and I am going to love this baby just as much." True to his word, Marcus became even more protective and attentive. He insisted on taking over all the heaviest work and made sure Eleanor ate properly and got enough rest. Eleanor found his concern both touching and occasionally frustrating, especially when he tried to stop her from doing things she was perfectly capable of doing. "I am not an invalid," she protested one day when he tried to take a basket of laundry from her. "I can still do laundry." "I know you can, but why should you when I am here to help?" He took the basket anyway. "Humor me, Eleanor. I just want to take care of you and our baby." She sighed but smiled. "Fine. But I am not going to spend the next 6 months sitting around doing nothing. I would never expect you to. Just let me help with the heavy lifting." As summer progressed, their homestead thrived. The sheep were healthy and producing excellent wool, which they sold in Council Bluffs for good prices. The garden was producing more vegetables than they could eat, so they preserved what they could and traded the rest. The pigs were growing well, and Marcus had plans to breed them in the fall. Eleanor's pregnancy progressed normally, though the summer heat made her uncomfortable. She spent more time indoors during the hottest parts of the day, working on projects like sewing baby clothes and preparing the small room Marcus had added onto the house. He had built a beautiful cradle from oak wood, sanding it until it was smooth as silk, and Eleanor had made soft blankets and tiny gowns. One evening in late August, they were sitting outside watching the sunset when Eleanor felt the baby kick for the first time. She gasped and grabbed Marcus's hand, pressing it to her swollen belly. "Feel that. The baby is kicking." Marcus's eyes went wide with wonder as he felt the movement beneath his palm. "That is our baby. That is really our baby in there. It is really real now, is it not?" Eleanor said softly. "In a few months, we will be parents. I hope I am a good father. I hope I can give this child everything they need. You will be wonderful. You are already so loving and protective, and the baby is not even born yet." Eleanor leaned her head on his shoulder. "Our child is so lucky to have you." "I am the lucky one. I have a beautiful wife, a home I love, and a baby on the way. A year ago I was alone and drifting. Now I have everything I ever wanted." In November, as promised, their baby arrived. Eleanor's labor was long and difficult, lasting nearly 24 hours. Marcus stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her forehead, encouraging her. Mrs. Henderson came to help with the delivery, bringing her practical experience from birthing her own 5 children. Finally, in the early hours of a cold November morning, their son was born. He came into the world screaming lustily, with a shock of dark hair and eyes that would eventually turn brown like his father's. "A boy," Mrs. Henderson announced, placing the cleaned and wrapped baby in Eleanor's arms. "A healthy, strong boy." Eleanor looked down at her son, feeling overwhelmed by a rush of love so powerful it brought tears to her eyes. He was perfect, absolutely perfect, with tiny fingers and a sweet little face. Marcus knelt beside the bed, his own eyes wet, and touched the baby's cheek with one gentle finger. "He is beautiful," Marcus whispered, "just like his mother." "He has your hair," Eleanor said, smiling through her tears. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy but had never quite decided. Now, looking at their son, Marcus said, "What about William?" "William Thomas Cartwright. We can call him Will." "William Thomas Cartwright." Eleanor tested the name and nodded. "I love it. Hello, Will. Welcome to the world, little one." Will proved to be a good baby, healthy and growing well, though he had strong lungs and was not shy about using them when he was hungry or uncomfortable. Eleanor threw herself into motherhood with the same determination she brought to everything else, learning to manage the baby while still helping with the homestead work. Marcus was a devoted father from the start. He would walk Will around the property when the baby was fussy, showing him the sheep and the pigs, and telling him about all the work they would do together when Will was older. Eleanor would watch them together, her heart full, and marvel at how completely their lives had changed. As Will grew from an infant to a toddler, the homestead continued to flourish. They expanded the flock to 45 sheep, added more pigs, and even acquired a milk cow. Marcus built a larger chicken coop, and they increased their flock of chickens to 20, selling eggs and young birds in town. By the time Will was 2, they were well established as one of the more successful small farms in the area. They had a reputation for quality animals and fair dealing, and other farmers often came to them for advice or to purchase breeding stock. Eleanor got pregnant again when Will was 2.5. This time, the pregnancy was easier, perhaps because she knew what to expect. Their daughter, Sarah, was born in the spring of 1882, a small, delicate baby with Eleanor's red hair and green eyes. "Now we have one of each," Marcus said, holding Sarah while Will climbed on his lap to see his new sister. "Our family is complete." "Complete for now," Eleanor said with a smile. "Who knows what the future will bring?" The future brought prosperity and happiness. Over the next 5 years, their operation grew to include 60 sheep, a herd of 10 cattle, and a thriving trade in pigs and chickens. They hired a young man named Tom to help with the heavy work, giving Marcus time to focus on the breeding programs and business side of things. Will grew into a sturdy, cheerful boy who loved helping his father with the animals. Sarah was more reserved but showed an early talent for gardening, spending hours helping Eleanor in the vegetable patch. They were good children, healthy and happy, and Eleanor and Marcus were proud of them. In 1887, when Will was 6 and Sarah was 5, Eleanor discovered she was pregnant again. It was a surprise, but a welcome one. Their third child, a son they named Joseph, was born in early 1888. He had Marcus's dark coloring but Eleanor's green eyes, and from the start, he was different from his siblings. Quieter, more thoughtful, content to observe the world around him. 3 children, Marcus said one evening, watching all 3 of them play in the yard while he and Eleanor sat on the porch. We have been well and truly blessed, have we not? We have. Eleanor took his hand, interlacing their fingers. Sometimes I still cannot believe this is my life. 10 years ago I was alone and exhausted, barely surviving. Now look at us. It is because of you, your strength, your determination, your willingness to take a chance on a drifter who showed up at your door. Marcus raised her hand to his lips and kissed it. You saved me, Eleanor. In every way a person can be saved. We saved each other, Eleanor corrected gently. I could not have done any of this alone. As their children grew, Marcus and Eleanor made sure to teach them the value of hard work and the importance of caring for the land and animals. Will learned animal husbandry from his father, becoming skilled at recognizing illness in the flock and understanding breeding principles. Sarah took over much of the garden, expanding it to include herbs and medicinal plants. Joseph, as he grew older, showed an unexpected talent for woodworking, making repairs and building things with the same skill his father had. In 1895, when Eleanor was 39 and Marcus was 42, they celebrated their 17th wedding anniversary. It was a quiet celebration, just the 2 of them sitting on the porch after the children had gone to bed, sharing a bottle of wine they had saved for a special occasion. 17 years, Eleanor mused. It feels like both a lifetime and no time at all. I know what you mean. I can still remember the first time I saw you, standing there with that rifle pointed at me, looking fierce and exhausted. Marcus chuckled. I knew right then that you were someone special. I thought you might be a criminal on the run, Eleanor admitted. I was so suspicious. You had every right to be, a strange man showing up at your door, but I am glad you gave me a chance anyway. Eleanor leaned against his shoulder, comfortable and content. I am glad, too. You gave me everything I dreamed of and so much more, a true partnership, a family, a life I love. You gave me a home, a purpose, a reason to be better than I was. Marcus wrapped his arm around her. I love you as much today as I did 17 years ago, more actually because now I know all your quirks and habits and I love those too, my quirks. Eleanor laughed. What quirks? The way you always check the sheep pen 3 times before bed, even though you know it is secure. The way you hum when you are working in the garden. The way you get a little crease between your eyebrows when you are concentrating. He kissed her forehead, right where the crease appeared. All the little things that make you uniquely you. Well, I love your quirks too. The way you always make sure I have coffee ready when I wake up. The way you talk to the animals like they can understand every word. The way you still look at me sometimes like you cannot quite believe I am real. That is because sometimes I cannot. Sometimes I wake up and have to remind myself that this is not a dream, that I really am this lucky. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars come out one by one. The homestead was quiet around them. The animals settled for the night. their children sleeping safely inside. It was a peaceful moment, the kind that made Eleanor grateful for every decision that had led her to this point. Will married at 23, bringing home a sweet young woman named Mary from town. They built a house on the far end of the property, and Will continued working the farm with his father. Sarah, more independent, decided to pursue teaching and took a position at the school in Council Bluffs, though she came home often to help with the garden and visit her family. Joseph, now 15, was still deciding what he wanted to do with his life, but he seemed content to work with wood and help around the homestead. Marcus and Eleanor grew older gracefully, their hair turning gray, their bodies showing the wear of years of hard work. But they were still active and involved in the farm, working alongside their children and the hired hands they now employed. In 1903, their first grandchild was born, a girl named Emma, Will and Mary's daughter. Eleanor cried the first time she held her granddaughter, overwhelmed by the circle of life continuing. Marcus was equally smitten, and they spent hours doting on the baby. "I cannot believe we are grandparents," Eleanor said, rocking Emma in the same cradle Marcus had built for Will all those years ago. "It makes me feel ancient." "You are not ancient. You are distinguished." Marcus grinned at her. "And still beautiful, even if your hair is gray now." "Your hair is gray too, you know." "Yes, but I was handsome to begin with, so I can afford to lose a little." He ducked the pillow she threw at him, laughing. More grandchildren followed. Will and Mary had 2 more children, and Sarah eventually married a fellow teacher and had a daughter of her own. Joseph surprised everyone by falling in love with a talented woodcarver from Omaha, and they settled nearby, opening a furniture-making business that became quite successful. Marcus and Eleanor gradually stepped back from the day-to-day operations of the farm, letting Will take over the management while they enjoyed their later years. They still helped out, of course, but they also took time to simply enjoy each other's company, to travel occasionally, and to spoil their grandchildren. On their 40th wedding anniversary in 1918, the entire family gathered at the homestead for a celebration. The original small sod house had been replaced years ago by a proper 2-story farmhouse, and the barn Marcus had built with such care had been expanded several times. The property was thriving, a testament to 40 years of hard work and dedication. Eleanor stood on the porch, looking out at the gathering of children, grandchildren, hired hands, and friends, and felt Marcus come up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Quite a turnout," he murmured in her ear. "It is wonderful. All these people, all this life, all because of one decision 40 years ago." She turned in his arms to face him. "Because I took a chance on a cowboy who showed up at my door looking for work. Because you were brave enough to trust me, brave enough to build this life with me." Marcus kissed her softly. "40 years, Eleanor, and I would do it all again in a heartbeat." "So would I. Every moment, every challenge, every joy, all of it." She smiled up at him, her eyes still as green as they had been when she was young. "I love you, Marcus Cartwright. I always have and I always will." "I love you too, Eleanor, forever and always." They stood together on the porch, surrounded by the life they had built together, and watched the sun set over the Iowa prairie. The sheep grazed peacefully in the distance. The sound of laughter and conversation drifted from the party below, and everything was exactly as it should be. Eleanor thought back to that desperate, exhausted woman who had been sleeping in shifts to protect her flock, who had been so alone and afraid. She thought about the cowboy who had ridden up that evening, offering help when she needed it most. She thought about every moment since then, the challenges they had faced, the joys they had shared, the love that had grown deeper with each passing year. It had all started with a simple exchange, She had needed someone to take the night watch, and he had needed a place to belong. From that modest beginning, they had built something extraordinary. A marriage based on mutual respect and partnership. A family filled with love. A legacy that would continue for generations. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Marcus took Eleanor's hand and led her down to join their family. They were surrounded by people who loved them, people who existed because they had found each other all those years ago. It was a good life, a full life, the kind of life that mattered. That night, after all the guests had left and the house was quiet, Marcus and Eleanor lay in their bed talking softly as they had done for 40 years. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I had not stopped at your homestead that night?" Marcus asked. "If I had just kept riding, sometimes, but I try not to dwell on it because it makes me sad to think about. We were meant to find each other, Marcus. I truly believe that. So do I. It was fate or luck or divine intervention. Whatever you want to call it, I am grateful for it every single day." Eleanor snuggled closer to him, fitting perfectly against his side as she had done for 4 decades. "We have had a good life together, have we not? The best life." "Better than I ever dreamed possible." He kissed the top of her head. "And it is not over yet. We still have years ahead of us, God willing. Years to watch our grandchildren grow. Years to enjoy this beautiful place we have built. Years to love each other." Eleanor sighed contentedly. "I cannot wait." They fell asleep as they had almost every night for 40 years, wrapped in each other's arms, secure in their love, grateful for every moment they had been given. Marcus and Eleanor lived many more years together, remaining active and engaged well into their 70s. They saw more grandchildren born and even lived to meet several great-grandchildren. The homestead continued to prosper under Will's management, becoming one of the largest and most respected farms in the region. When Eleanor passed away in 1929 at the age of 73, it was peacefully in her sleep, with Marcus holding her hand. She had lived a long, full life, surrounded by love, and she left behind a legacy of strength, determination, and devotion that would be remembered for generations. Marcus grieved deeply, but took comfort in the family they had built together, and the knowledge that Eleanor had been happy. He lived another 3 years, spending his time with his children and grandchildren, telling stories about the early days and the remarkable woman who had changed his life. When Marcus died in 1932 at the age of 79, he was buried next to Eleanor in the small cemetery on the hill overlooking the homestead they had built together. His last words, spoken to Will, were simple. "Take care of the place. Your mother loved it so much." The homestead remained in the family for many years, passed down through the generations, each one adding their own improvements and innovations while honoring the foundation that Marcus and Eleanor had laid. The story of how they met became family legend. The exhausted shepherd who had been sleeping in shifts to protect her flock, and the cowboy who had taken the night watch and stayed forever. Their great-great-grandchildren still visited the old homestead, now a working farm that had been continuously operated by the same family for over a century. They walked the same land that Eleanor had walked, looked out over the same rolling prairie, and felt connected to a love story that had started with an act of simple kindness and grown into something extraordinary. Because sometimes, the most powerful love stories are not about grand gestures or dramatic declarations. Sometimes, they are about two people who find each other when they need it most, who choose to work together toward a common goal, who build something lasting out of determination and trust and quiet devotion. Marcus and Eleanor's story was one of those. A story about partnership and perseverance, about two lonely souls finding home in each other. A story that proved that love, when built on a foundation of respect and shared purpose, could not only endure but thrive, creating ripples that would echo through generations. It all started on a twilight evening in 1878, with a woman desperately trying to protect her sheep and a cowboy looking for a place to belong. What they built together became a testament to the power of taking chances, of offering help to strangers, of believing in the possibility of happiness even in the hardest times. Their love story was written in every fence post Marcus had driven into the ground, every sheep Eleanor had carefully tended, every meal they had shared, every challenge they had overcome together. It was written in the faces of their descendants, in the land they had cultivated, in the life they had created from almost nothing. And if you visited that homestead even now, over a century later, you could still feel it. The echo of two people who had loved each other so completely that their devotion had become part of the very soil, as permanent and enduring as the Iowa prairie itself. It was a love that had started with a simple bargain: you take the night watch, and I will give you a place to stay, and had transformed into something far more precious than either of them could have imagined: the cowboy and the shepherd, the drifter and the homesteader, Marcus and Eleanor. Two people who had found each other in the darkness and had spent the rest of their lives building something beautiful in the light. It was a story worth remembering, worth telling, worth honoring. Because true love, the kind that lasts, the kind that matters, is not about fairy tales and perfect moments. It is about showing up every day, working together, choosing each other again and again. That was what Marcus and Eleanor had done. They had chosen each other that first night, and they had kept choosing each other every day after, through 47 years of marriage, through every challenge and joy, until death finally parted them. And even then, their love lived on in the legacy they had built, in their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, in the land they had tended, in the life they had created together. It was a love story for the ages, written not in poetry or grand speeches, but in the quiet language of partnership and devotion. A love story that had started in the Wild West, in a time when survival was uncertain and the future was unknown, and had grown into something eternal. The sheep that Eleanor had fought so hard to protect had long since been replaced by new generations, but the spirit of her fierce determination lived on. The night watch that Marcus had taken that first evening had lasted for decades, protecting not just sheep but a family, a home, a way of life. And though both of them were gone now, returned to the earth they had worked so hard, their story remained, because some love stories never really end. They just become part of the landscape, woven into the fabric of a place and the memory of the people who come after. Marcus and Eleanor's love was like that. Timeless, enduring, a beacon of hope for anyone who believed that even in the hardest times, love could find a way. And on quiet evenings, when the sun set over the Iowa prairie and the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, you could almost see them there. A young woman with auburn hair and green eyes, standing watch over her flock, and a dark-haired cowboy with kind brown eyes, riding up the trail toward her. Two souls about to find each other, two lives about to become one. It was a beautiful thing, that moment when everything changed, that moment when loneliness ended and partnership began. That moment when two people looked at each other and recognized something precious, a future worth building, a love worth fighting for, a life worth living together. That was the heart of Marcus and Eleanor's story. Not the grand triumphs or the dramatic moments, but the simple, profound decision to build a life together, one day at a time, one challenge at a time, one act of love at a time. And in doing so, they had created something that would last long after they were gone, a legacy of love that would inspire their descendants for generations to come. The homestead still stood, weathered but strong, a monument to their devotion. The land still produced, nurtured by over a century of careful stewardship that had started with Eleanor's fierce protectiveness and Marcus's willingness to help. The family still gathered there, drawn by a connection to their history and the remarkable love story that had started it all. And somewhere, beyond the veil between this world and the next, Marcus and Eleanor were together still, watching over the place they had loved, the family they had created, the legacy they had built. Together, as they had always been, from that first night when he had taken the watch and she had finally been able to rest. It was a good ending. No, it was a perfect ending, because it was not really an ending at all but a continuation. Love like theirs did not end. It just transformed, becoming part of something larger, something eternal. It became inspiration and hope and proof that even in the wildest, hardest places, love could not only survive but flourish. That was the gift Marcus and Eleanor had given to everyone who came after them. The knowledge that love, real love, was worth every sacrifice, every challenge, every moment of fear or doubt. Because when you found the right person, when you built something together based on trust and respect and shared purpose, you created something that could weather any storm. They had proven it over 47 years of marriage, through good times and bad, through prosperity and hardship, through all the ordinary moments that made up a life. They had proven that love was not just a feeling but a choice, one that had to be made every day. And they had made that choice, over and over again, until it became as natural as breathing. That was why their story mattered. That was why it deserved to be told and remembered. Because in a world that often felt uncertain and frightening, their love was a reminder that good things were possible. That happiness could be found, even in the most unlikely circumstances. That two people who barely knew each other could build a life together that would matter for generations. The cowboy and the shepherd, Marcus and Eleanor. Two names that would forever be linked, two souls that had found their perfect match. They had started with nothing but hope and hard work, and they had created everything. A home, a family, a love that would never die. And that, in the end, was what mattered most. Not the size of the homestead or the number of sheep or the years they had lived. What mattered was the love they had shared, the partnership they had built, the life they had created together. That was their true legacy, and it was more valuable than gold. As the sun set on another day over the Iowa prairie, the land remembered them. The wind whispered their names. The earth held their bones. And their love, that beautiful, enduring love, lived on in every person who had been touched by their story. It was a love story for the ages. A Wild West romance that had started with a simple need: she slept in shifts so coyotes would not take her sheep, and the cowboy took the night watch, and had grown into something magnificent. Something worth celebrating, something worth remembering forever. And they lived and loved and built a life together that mattered. That was the story. That was the truth. That was the legacy of Marcus and Eleanor Cartwright, two people who had found each other in the darkness and had spent the rest of their days creating light.